What's up amigos, Commander Hammer here. Today we're going to do a Genesis deck profile, so specifically Himiko with a new Himiko Reverse support. So we're going to go over some of the winning image and how it got affected from the prior deck profile, and then of course some of the card choices and also some closing thoughts and suggestions that I like to mention too. So let's get right into it. Next Level Gaming has the new playmats already out. We have Bruce versus Bastion over here. Really amazing artwork, so I highly recommend. We also have the Vanguard Valentine's one, so if you're into like Angel Feather for example, this would be perfect as well. And in the future coming out, we'll have something with Zorga versus Seraph Snow, so I'm excited for that one too. I'm gonna actually get that one myself too, so you can check out the affiliated link down in the description below and also get a 10% discount on your next purchase. So for Himiko specifically, you know, we still rely on the old winning image strategy, and so the original Himiko is where you can Soul Blast 5 and you can put a crit or a draw trigger from your soul to the bottom of your deck, and then you activate that trigger's effects each of your grades, each of your opponent's grades. So for example, if your opponent's at grade 2, you activate it twice. If they're at grade 3, you activate it 3 times. And so you can capitalize that and you actually use a rearguard such as Idrisil right here. And Idrisil for us, for the Regalia engine, is a restanding column, and it could be a rearguard in the sense too, because that way Himiko's benefit is from the Vanguard circle. So that way you can stack, you know, let's say your opponent's at grade 2, you stack 2 critical trigger effects onto it and a force 2 marker, then that column is 43k with crit 4, and that pressure is still insane. The only way to kind of like stop that now is really with the help of perfect guards, of course, but then now we have the grade 3 heals that we do have to take into account. So the game might go an extra turn or 2 for this deck, so it may not be able to close that out because of the grade 3 heals, so just keep that in mindful. And so for that strategy, to help out with that, we have the reverse Himiko over here on the left. And so what does this card even do? So it has 2 skills and it has a hand skill, which I think is the most neat, is that at the end of your turn when you have a Vanguard with Himiko in the name and you've activated trigger effects at least twice, you can actually use the cost as one or more of your rearguards. You can put them all into your soul and then ride this onto your Vanguard circle as rested. So you would get an additional force marker. You would actually ride this. You'll get to use your rearguards as soul for the following turn as well. So it's just like, okay, so that's kind of replenishing the soul you're riding, so the Himiko Vanguard prior becomes part of the soul. So you're kind of building up the soul in that sense too, and getting a force marker at the end of the turn. You know, nothing much has changed for that, where your main phase, you're still building up for Himiko to do the skill. Your battle phase is really just taking advantage of Idrisil or any other cards too that go hand in hand with that, and then this just kind of adds to it. So then the following thing is that, like, so what's the other skill do? On Vanguard circle, when this unit attacks or is attacked, you can kind of blast 1, draw a card, and then choose a crit or a draw trigger from your soul and put it onto your Vanguard circle as a locked card, and then you can activate that trigger's effect for each of your locked cards. So what that means, if you didn't have any locked cards before, you do it once. In total, you would have 1 locked card, so you would activate that trigger once. Now, if you do this during your opponent's turn, that locked card does not unlock until you're at the end of your turn specifically. So then if it goes back to you and you're still on Himiko Reverse and you use this skill on attack, you'll have a second locked card, and thus you'll be able to activate that trigger's effect twice when you attack in that sense. And so you're able to draw more advantage or have that crit pressure still. So it's kind of like Himiko in the sense. I almost see it as a worse Himiko in that scenario, because regular Himiko at that point will be able to activate a trigger 3 times because your opponent would be at grade 3. But it just gives you an extra more soul, gives you force markers, so it's kind of nice in that synergy as well in that regard too. And it's another Vanguard that you can kind of like ride as with, where you can save the Idrisil more onto the rearguard circle. We also got some cards like in the English that we didn't get from like the Japanese set for a while, and so one of them is Repler. Repler is really nice. It's the middle card over here. And so when you place it into rearguard circle, you can choose a card from your drop and put it into your soul. So if you have any crits that you may have guarded with, or maybe you already soul blasted or something like that, you can put those crits back into Himiko's soul to be able to use that for that following turn. And it's really nice in that sense too. And the second skill is what really makes this card even better, is that once per turn when this unit attacks, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can counter blast 1, choose one of your units, and until the end of the battle, this unit gets power and crit that unit got from trigger effects this turn. So if you stack the crits and power onto Idrisil and use these cards to copy from that, you get those same benefits too, which is awesome. Just keep in mind that your opponent's Vanguard has to be grade 3 or greater, so you can't like use this when you're at grade 3 and your opponent's at grade 2, unfortunately. But moving to the mid to late game, this is helpful because then you have 3 attacks that have a lot of crit and power from that your opponent has to deal with now at that point. And you also got cards like Arctic over here where it can stack the deck. It looks to tap 2, put 1 into your Saw, and then leave 1 on top, so that can help you put that crit if you really need it, or if you see a crit, you leave it on top of your deck, making your drive check even deadly. And then your Vanguard can get power because it's, you know, your Vanguard grade 3 greater attacks, it gets plus 5k, so it makes the Himiko column by itself a little bit stronger too, because most of the time you're using those triggers onto the Idrisil Rigard Circle. And then you got the Apple Witch Cider, which is a newer card from the set with Himiko Reverse, and it's just nice because it's a Soul Charger. So at the end of the battle, this unit boosts it, you can either Soul Charge 1 and bounce this card, or you could just Soul Charge 2. So early on, you could aggressively Soul Charge if you're going against a deck that doesn't touch your field. But if you're going against a deck that touches your field, you still have the benefit to Soul Charge at least 1 card and bounce it back, and then keep using it. And then of course, the benefit of bouncing it back to hand is the second skill. When this unit is placed into Guardian Circle, you can put a card into your from your hand into your soul, and this unit gets plus 5k shield additionally for every 3 cards in your soul. And so you could easily see this build up shield, but most importantly, you can put a crit trigger if you really need it. For that following turn, in that sense, to be able to do Himiko much more easier in that respect. So it lets you put stuff into the soul from your hand that you may have drawn or drove checked at that point too. Onto the grade 3s, we're playing 10 normal grade 3 units with 4 grade 3 Heal Guardians, and so right off the bat you may be asking yourself, why are you only playing 3 regular Himiko? I wanted to find room because there's only so much room, and I didn't want to clutter the grade 3s too as much. And I feel like once you write the first Himiko, you're already in a really good position that you may not need the extra copies until like maybe the next turn if you do rewrite with Himiko Reverse, for example. And then by then you'll be able to draw some cards, drive check, you may be able to see the next copy of Himiko, and at that point you can just rewrite if you need to or want to at that point. With that, because of making room, that's where I'm able to play 3 reverse Himiko. Before I was trying 2, because it's one of those things where you don't want to write immediately. You want to do original Himiko first and then go into reverse Himiko with her skill. But I wasn't seeing enough at 2, so I actually upped it to 3, and it's actually running a little more smoother in that sense. And again, you get the benefits of having that like defensiveness where you can kind of blast 1, use a triggers ability, a crit or a draw in that sense. In this build, we are playing 12 crits, so we're very aggressive in that sense. So it's just like the only defensiveness is really just getting the power up in that sense too, if you decide to use that. With the Idrisos, we do want to maximize at 4 because it's such a great card and it's dependent on the winning image too. And if you do actually write this into Vanguard Circle, you have access to a restanding Vanguard too, so it's not bad as a Vanguard write either. So it's just like, oh, that's actually really nice. And then of course, if you have like a force 2 marker and then your opponent's at like 4 damage, and you have a restanding Vanguard, they want to guard every single of those drive checks, and then you may have another column on the Rigard Circle as an Idrisil restanding, so you can have that pressure still too on top of that. And then the Great 3 Heal Guardians is because you want to have like some damage early on, so if they damage deny you can call this, get a damage, because Idrisil is the one that needs a counterblast. What's cool about Himiko, it doesn't use any counterblasts, so you're able to do Himiko as long as you have the soul requirements, and so that helps in that regard too. And then of course, if you fighting against a very aggressive deck too early on before you get to grade 3, before you're able to pop off, this helps you survive in that respect too. We are playing 11 grade 2s. We're playing 4 of the Norm, 4 of the Ulysses, and 3 of the Repler. So Norm goes with the Regalia engine. We use it to boost to be able to restand. Her other skill is Vanguard Circle and Rigard Circle. You can kind of blast 1, draw a card, and choose one of your Regards. Put a card from the Soul as a Divine Gauge for it, and then you can Soul Charge too. So this helps you Soul Charge even more too, so that way you can dig deeper into getting the crit into the Soul, building up the Soul for Himiko too. So this card's still valuable in that sense, outside of just having a restanding column for like Idrisil. And Ulysses is another great card that I feel like is necessary for a deck like this that really wants to build enough Soul by the time you write to grade 3. And Ulysses really at the end of the battle that he attacks, this can go into your Soul, you draw a card and Soul Charge 1. So at that moment you can see you add 2 to the Soul, and you can potentially Soul Charge your crit in that sense too, because it does Soul Charge from the deck, and then it gives you advantage back to work with too. And so that's why I feel like this is cool. You can put your opponent to 2 to 3 damage and you're already in lethal with just an Idrisil column on turn 3 in that sense, so it just helps with that too. And then Repler, like I mentioned, is really helping when your opponent's already at grade 3. This is another attack that they have to worry about, and as you can see, outside of Idrisil and maybe Norm, there's not much Counterblast being used in this deck, so Repler can take advantage of that Counterblast that still needs to be used and be able to finish the game. And so that's why I play 3. I've seen people play 4, which is fine too in that respect too, but I feel like 3 is just enough. especially when you're trying to make room for like the soul mitigation and other cards into the deck as well. Onto the grade 1s, we're playing 12 grade 1s. We're playing for the Apple Witch Cider, 3 of the High Tea, 3 of the Arctic, and then 2 of the Skull. And so again, with Apple Witch Cider, it's one of those new cards that helps Soul Charge bounce back, and then of course put some cards from your hand into your soul that can help out with the following turn to be able to pop out with Himiko, or just your strategy in general as well. And so that's what I'm playing for. You could probably reduce it to maybe 3, but it's something that I'm still feeling like even the grade 1s as we speak is still kind of flexible in which direction you want to go to. A good example is High Tea over here, where I wanted to be able to be Soul Charge 2 cards when you either write it as Vanguard or call it to Regard Circle, and then it's also like a booster in that sense too, because it's 13k booster or attacker if you really need it at that point too, to help with that column, such as Repler or even behind the Vanguard to have a decent booster in that sense too. But I feel like there are other cards that could help out, such as the Soul Blast Reducer, make it a Hime, or the new, not the new, but also like Bangle as well, that can put into crits. Here, let me focus on that. You can put any grade 2 or less card into from your hand into Soul, so that's where you can actually like maybe put a crit specifically that, without having to like just blindly Soul Charge through. So it's just like those things that we consider. So I think there's flexibility in that. And so the other cards that I wanted to try out more was like Arctic. Again, you can stack the deck and also get a chance to put a crit into Soul, or just leave it on top of your deck and give your Vanguard a little bit power up. And I like this because this is a grade 1, so you can have it as a booster. I know we used to rely on Prometheus, which is the grade 2, and the thing with it is that you have Repler now, so you in your front row you have Idrisil and Repler already. So if you were to use Prometheus, you would have to stick it like behind the Vanguard or something, but then it's a grade 2, so it can't boost. Or Arctic is really the same thing but as a grade 1, and you can still benefit from that regardless if you have a full front row or not in that sense. The same thing with Skull is really nice because it helps with that grade 3 consistency. It's just one of those things where like if you need a right consistency boost, there's Himiko, especially since we're playing 3 copies. Looking for a reverse too as well to be able to perform that at the end of the turn, and then if you need Idrisil at that moment, you can grab it too and go pop off in that sense too. So it helps with the consistency. So I feel like that's another reason why I'm able to get away with 3 Himiko, is because I am playing this guy too to help with that too. Onto the remaining triggers in grade 0. So as you can see, we are playing 12 crit. And one of the biggest things with Himiko, I felt like its true strength is really taking advantage of the critical trigger, not necessarily the draw trigger, because yeah, you can draw 2 to 3 cards and still get the benefits of power up, but like I feel like you're trying to end the game if possible when you go first going grade 3, and if you go second, it just gives you a stronger turn in that sense too. So literally your opponent can be 2 to 3 damage and you're always going to be lethal in that sense with those like abusive columns with Idrisil, and then if you have Repler, it's just like beneficial in that sense. So for me, I just wanted to go into that more aggressive side in 12 crit, and I've seen even decks that have done well with tournaments, whether it be Visions tournaments or other tournaments over the past like year or two, with just normal Himiko too. Like 12 crit I think is a good choice, and so that's why we played the Sentinel crits too. I mean, you could also play grade 1 PGs, there might be someone with that, but then you would rather use the grade 1s to help with soul charging or other aspects that the deck needs too. So that's why we're not playing any perfect guards, so you have to be conscientious of the matchup and hopefully that you want to just win immediately as soon as possible too. And so that's why we play these crits. We have the starter, and again, in that sense, get a tick of shield. Onto like the combo part of the video, so I kind of want to show you like the ride progression and some tips too that you want to do when you're starting off a game. Let's just assume you're going first in your hand. Your starting hand looks like this. This is a pretty decent hand, and I'm going to show off some cool interactions too. So starting off, you want to ride into your high T. You can draw first, you draw Repler, and then soul charge too. And look at that, we already got a crit. That's actually pretty good. It's already looking good. And since you went first, you can pass turn. At that point, they'll attack. You take the damage, crit, power, go to your turn, draw a card. Now from my hand, you can ride, let's say, Regalia from Normal Fate. You can call Ulysses and Cider. And because we opened with a second Cider, I'm gonna call it behind the Vanguard. So assuming that your opponent's gonna give you damage, you can use a counterblast skill. Draw a card. Put a Divine Gauge. Let's say behind this one. And then soul charge too. Oh, okay. Another crit. Would you look at that? So right now, as a grade 2, you have 5 in the soul. And then of course, when you ride to grade 3, you already have 6 soul, which one of them will be a crit, and then you can soul blast 5 to be able to do Himiko. So just be able to soul charge with her skill, and high T, you're able to make it there at that zone. But if you don't have those cards, you still have the Cider Witches to work with in that sense too. A cool strategy that I like to do is attack with the Vanguard with this, and then this will be 10 plus 8, 18. Your drive check could be a trigger. Any effects, put it on the Rigard column. And then of course at the end of the battle that it boosts it, you can soul charge 2. In this case, let's say we're going against an opponent that isn't like field controlling as much. But another combo that I want to show is this column specifically. So when you attack this 18k, at the end of the battle, both their effects trigger. So this will go into your soul, draw you a card, and soul charge 1. Then this will trigger, and if you want, you can soul charge 1 to bounce it back to your hand. So this whole column can come back to your hand or slice go into your soul to give you a new card. And you can essentially just like be able to commit cards and then get advantage back when you're facing a deck that can remove your cards on the field. So that's just something to keep in mind too. So let's say your opponent just gives you 2 damage in this case. Then you go to your next turn. Draw. That's where we ride the Himiko. You go first 2. In terms of my hand, some of the cards I've been drawing to, we see these. And so we have the reverse Himiko intact. So this is where you kind of want to inspect your soul too. You have a crit to work with, you have a second crit to work with. If you didn't have a second crit, you may want to call a crit to the Rigard circle, so that way you just soul charge it, and then that way the reverse Himiko can be able to use it if they live this turn, for example. So then you're going to call Idrisil, use the skill to counterblast and grab Norn. Now depending if you want to go ham more in your opponent's at grade 2, you can actually call a card such as Arctic, and you can even have a booster like this. Arctic can then stack, can check the top 2 for a card, and then ooh, this is where you want to stack a crit on top of the deck, and then you can soul charge this, which is really nice. You can call a Cider card to be able to bounce back too, so that way you don't lose too much advantage in that sense too. And then Himiko can use her skill. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you could Soul Blast 5. Bottom deck the crit, and this is your soul still. Activate twice onto the Idrisil, the crits, so that way you're a 43k. Oh, and don't forget to add a Divine Gauge to Norm when you grab it with Idrisil. That's very important too. So glad I caught that. So depending on your opponent's damage, if they're already kind of like lethal or they have a Rigard that you could bully, you could attack with the Vanguard first or with the Rigard column, just depends on that. But we did stack a crit trigger, so we have to be mindful of Cider soul charge too. So you probably want to attack with the Vanguard first in this case, and if they have like a Rigard, you can bully it, so that way you can put all that pressure into Idrisil. But if they're already like kind of close to like, let's say 4 damage, then they're gonna want to guard this anyway. So then your drive check is crit, put that all in here. Another, oh my gosh. Another crit. So to add into that skill, so charge 1, bounce this, Divine Gauge will just fall off, and then this is where you can be lethal. Now normally if you didn't have triggers, this is 43k crit 4, but we popped 2 more crits, so that's like 63k 6 crit. So that's pretty absurd, but it can happen in matchups. And then of course you use the skill to discard a card and the Divine Gauge to restain your Vanguard. Same attack, same crit pressure, and if they guarded that, that's amazing. They're crippled or something, or they're not in a good position to whatever, and then this can be the finishing blow if you need to. And then of course this is soul charge 1 to bounce back to hand. And then here's the end of the turn magic, and so you do reverse Himiko, suck in all your rear guards, which kind of sucks because you want to keep Idrisil in arm, but this helps build your soul. And since you rode, you get another force marker, so you can put it as the Vanguard for Vanguard pressure in a sense. And so let's say they give you some damage, right? And then you can use the skill to counterblast 1 in that sense to call the crit here, for example, lock it. You get plus 10k, obviously. Then it can go to your turn, stand and draw. And then depending on what you have in your hand, which I don't have the Himiko, you can kind of go off of it. You can use Repler here as well. Put it here as well. And then Himiko Reverse can attack, and then her skill counterblast 1 to get the other crit that we have. This will trigger twice. And so plus 20k and a crit. In this example, since we're using Repler, you can put it onto the Vanguard. So your Vanguard with the Force 2 marker is crit 4 and plus 20k. So this is like 33k. And then they can guard it. And then if you have any triggers, we didn't this time. And then Repler can attack and then use its skill. It's gonna let us to get all the crit and power. So this is plus 20k and 2 more crit on top of that with a Force 2 marker. So this is crit 4, 30 plus 8, 38k. And then if you have any additional triggers from the drive track, it's even bigger. So this just is an example of how you progress with the game with the Himiko deck. So I hope this was helpful. And that's the deck profile, amigos. I hope you enjoyed it. This deck is pretty fun actually. And so I recommend, you know, if you already have the cards, why not build it? It's really easy to pilot and everything. And you can get a lot of bang for your buck in the sense of like just having that crit stack to a Rigard column. You could try out some different things in the grade 1s and even the grade 2 slots. You can mess with the ratios in the grade 3. I think there's some flexibility there too. Like I mentioned, maybe the grade 3, the Soul Blast 3 reducer can be something. The Bangle, the Aura card can be useful too in that regard. In terms of like regular premium, there might be some more options in that format too, but I'm not too sure. But for V Premium, this is what we got, and I really like it in the sense it's definitely a fun, more casual deck that can kind of catch certain decks by surprise, and you can like steal matches in that sense too. So it's worth playing and trying that out, especially if you have an aggressive like crit lineup, or you do go back to like maybe the 4 draw or do a split in those like Sentinel crit, Sentinel PG draws in that sense too. So if you liked the video, you know, give it down a like, you know, share with a fellow amigo that likes Genesis or even Himiko wants to know how it works too. Feel free to share it. It helps the channel out since you may have found this as some of value, and that way other card fighters like yourself can find this as well. And then if you do want to support the channel, use this the affiliated links with TCG Player for cards if you're shopping through them. Or if you want to level up your gaming, you can use Next Level Gaming's 10% discount code or the link itself to be able to get that on your purchase too. We just got the keychains, and I don't know if they're doing keychains anymore, but they're still doing the playmats too. So, but be a lookout for the playmats too, and there's a special too if you get 3. Especially with Team Link coming along, you can get 3 with a discount of 25% off too as well, your whole order. So if you and your buddies like some of the mats or want to try them out together, and you guys are going to meet up anyway for Team Link, you guys can make an order that way together in that sense too. And comment down below, what are your thoughts about the Himiko deck? What are some things that you're trying out or suggest that you may want to tweak to this deck to whatever your local metagame is? Definitely love to hear feedback more about this deck. This deck is pretty fun too as well. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for instant notifications for future content with this channel too. Without further ado, till the next time, amigos. Bye!